Well, it's been an eventful day to say the least, and clearly a significant one for Britain's future. Joining me to chew over the day's events are Paul Mason and Iain Dale. But first, here's a clip that's been circulating of Paul Mason today, and we must warn you, it contains some very strong language.
We, the British people, will be outside Downing Street.
We, the British people, will be outside Downing Street.
At 12 o'clock on Saturday. We are coming for you, Boris Johnson.
We are coming for you, Boris Johnson.
Ready or fucking not?
Well, I hope you weren't shocked by that. Was that really you? We just have to ascertain that truly was you.
Where's my clip?
Yeah,
Have you been swearing too?
That's called the human microphone. We didn't have a sound system, so we had to be able to announce what we were going to do.
And actually, I mean, is it responsible for you to essentially be encouraging what?
What?
Unrest?
Mass civil disobedience.
Yeah.
Well, it's unrest, absolutely. We just had our democracy stolen from us by a man who has no majority in Parliament and no mandate from an election. So I'm afraid, you come from a Lancashire mining town, as I do, we know that everything we've ever got had to be fought for. We will fight for a democracy.
Just before we carry on, if we look to our big screen now, the petition, the petition to government not to prorogue Parliament as we're speaking this very minute has gone over 1 million signatures, and the last time that was the Article 50. So that is in quite a short space of time. It has gone over 1 million, and it's moving up very, very quickly. Before I come to Iain Dale for his reaction, let's go to the front pages. We have got Financial Times uproar as Johnson shuts down Parliament to protect Brexit plan. On the Daily Telegraph, the Prime Minister must give effect to the will of the nation. Of course, that's the will of the nation as expressed through the referendum. The Independent goes for the Johnson coup with 63 days until the October deadline. An unelected Prime Minister has made himself unaccountable to MPs for 5 weeks. Goes on to talk about his Scottish leader. And then just the Daily Mail, Boris Johnson takes the gloves off. Iain Dale, do you think a vote of confidence would have any chance of succeeding?
With a majority of one, of course it has a chance of succeeding, but I keep sort of wavering as to whether it's likely to happen. Yesterday I thought it wouldn't. Today, initially I thought this made it all much more likely, but now I'm wondering, listening to Barry Gardner there and
Jo Swinson.
And Jo Swinson, I'm thinking, well, are they going to wimp out of doing this? Because they're talking about all these legislative means that they've got up their sleeves, but no one can quite work out what that would be. And they haven't, as you said, they haven't got much time to effect it.
And Jonathan Sumption actually echoed that. There's very little time. So actually, it looks like the cabinet's behind him going for it as we expected. It looks like the remaining. It looks like some of these MPs, the Conservative MPs, are sounding a bit less sound and fury. The ones that are actually against it. You've got a limited legislative time. No chance, I would say, from the sounds of both Barry Gardner and Jo Swinson, of getting a vote of no confidence through. Your fox is shot.
Well, I think the missing thing from this debate, and you showed a bit of a clip, you showed me and my colleagues out there, there's been about 8,000 to 10,000 people on Whitehall. Many of them were young, many of them were, some are Polish migrants, but what was the interesting thing, I recognised faces that, like me, had been on that street, Whitehall, in 1990 when we stopped the poll tax. What I don't think Boris Johnson, Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings don't know, they don't know the world, Kirsty, of mass unrest.
But hang on, what are you actually saying here?
What I'm saying is that by peaceful mass protest, we can convince those MPs to do what is necessary.
But peaceful mass protest, Iain Dale?
Well, when has that ever worked?
It worked on Thatcher, it brought her down.
It didn't work.
Well, you're going to say it probably worked in the poll tax.
I mean, 1 million people marched on the Iraq War. That didn't. Well, up to a point. I don't think that actually brought her down. There are many reasons why she was brought down. Just to pick up on something that Paul said there about the fact that there has been no government representative on your programme, or on any programme today. I thought that when this new government came in, they would change their media strategy. It's exactly the same as Theresa May. They leave it to people like me to try and make the case for what they're doing.
What does that say to you?
Well, it says to me that their media strategy is completely wrong, because politicians are there on both sides, whether it's Jeremy Corbyn or Boris Johnson or whoever, or their shadow cabinet and cabinet, to come on programmes and make their case to people. Because if they don't make the case, it'll go by default.
And can I just say, they are repeatedly asked. It's
I know.
not for the one
I have the same on my show.
Endlessly.
Yeah.
it's a strategy of contempt for the electorate, because that's the act. Look, we've all been focusing on the prorogation, and it is an unprecedented one. And I think Jonathan Sumption made that case, but it was accompanied by a briefing from Number 10 that if you win a vote of no confidence, we shall ignore it. That, for me, is what made me wake up this morning thinking this guy wants to destroy British democracy. And I tell you what, the people on the streets with me tonight were thinking the same thing. You can only read a government through its actions.
But Boris Johnson is saying very clearly that there will be a chance to debate Brexit on what, obviously after the Queen's speech. When he lays out his legislative programme, there will be a chance.
Sorry,
well, there is another aspect to this. If you talk to Nigel Farage and people who you would say were ultra Brexiteers, their fear is that part of this strategy is to enable Boris Johnson to bring back a version of the withdrawal agreement with maybe the backstop.
Which the ERG will probably back without the backstop.
No, I don't think they would.
Well, I think
that there are many purists, so-called, in the ERG who would not do that. So that is a danger because to the Conservative Party, because if Nigel Farage says, well, we wouldn't support that, and there was an election following that, it's very difficult to see how Boris Johnson could win if the Brexit Party are fighting that election.
I agree. The only thing that can be discussed after the 14th of October is another deal, and if he brings one back, I'm not convinced he can get it through. So that's another opportunity for vote of no confidence.
Very briefly, sad to see Ruth Davidson looks like she's going tomorrow.
I think it is sad. I do think it is. The majority of the reasons, I believe, are personal reasons. Obviously, there is a political aspect too. But it's for Conservatives in Scotland, they will be bereft because that could mean no Conservative MPs at the next election.
Thank you both very much. That's all we have time for. We're going to be back.